Irish Nation, welcome to the show. Your Notre Dame Fighting Irish win the Sugar Bowl over the Georgia Bulldogs 23-10. Mike, welcome. I'm exhausted. It has been a long week here in New Orleans for a lot of reasons that I'll get into in a minute. But I think the biggest victory as a Notre Dame fan in our lifetime, like maybe the 93 Florida State game when you and I were still wearing diapers. I'm here in New Orleans. You've been traveling a lot. Start off just you watched this game on delay on TV. What was it like getting to step back and watch this Notre Dame victory?
Yeah, so I mean, to start with my viewership scenario. So basically, my flight back home from Minnesota to LA, the departure time was kickoff time to the minute. So when they announced that, initially my thought was, all right, look, I'm just going to want to know what the score is as soon as I land. But then when I started thinking about it more, once I started thinking about this team and kind of where how far we've come this season and how big an opportunity this is, I think what I realized was, well, you know what? If this is a game that we pull off the win, and if we pull off that win, this would be, as you said, Brett, the biggest win we've had in decades. I really want to be able to experience the live emotion of that. So I made the decision to tape the game on YouTube TV and just turn off my phone, just airplane mode, no Wi-Fi. I texted a bunch of my friends, told them that I was doing that. I said, hey, if there's like an emergency, like my wife, she will have her phone when we land, and you guys can text her if there's something crazy that happens. And and I went completely dark on the flight, avoided spoilers at the airport when we landed, and then when we landed, I watched the game like probably like like a 3 hours after the game ended. And man, boy, am I glad that I did, because that game right there, that is the best moment that I've experienced as a Notre Dame fan. I think this is the biggest win in probably 31. I think I saw someone say like 31 years or something like that.
Totally.
This to me is Notre Dame arriving. This is Notre Dame. I'm not going to call us a sleeping giant, because we obviously have been in some big games, in the last like 15 years or so. But if you're if you're looking at Notre Dame and their historical success and how many championships we've won and how we've just defined college football era after era, we haven't, in the last 30 years, we really haven't quite been at that level. This to me, this is the type of game that says, oh shoot, Notre Dame has arrived. They just beat the SEC champion. They just beat a team that won 2 of the last 3 championships. That's a type of game that Notre Dame has not won in the last 30 years. This is a game that we haven't won since Lou Holtz, when we were regularly contending for national championships. So I think watching the realization of that live, man, I'm glad that I tipped the game, because I think if I had just landed and I saw the final score, of course I would have been thrilled, but it definitely would not even come close to the emotion that I was experiencing as I was watching it play after play, and realizing, oh, okay, look, this team is like, this is a game where we believe that we not only had a chance to win, but had a really good chance to win. And we showed up and excelled and beat one of the best teams in the country. And look, we've been saying for weeks, maybe Notre Dame's not a favorite to win the title, but we are a title contender. And I think this just firmly established that. And knocking off a team like this, like, our title odds are definitely significantly higher now. Like, we're still not a favorite, but those odds have jumped up quite a bit. It would not be crazy.
Odds other than Ohio State's. Yeah.
Yes, it would not be crazy if we won a national title this year. I agree. I think Ohio State's probably the favorite, but I think probably the most likely championship scenario here is Notre Dame versus Ohio State. Yeah. And look, Ohio State, they're looking pretty tough right now, but we're looking pretty tough too. And I'll take my odds in that game.
Totally. I was fortunate to get to watch this game with your dad and brother. Had tickets with us along with our friends, Pat, Liz, Kathy. You guys were amazing hosts for us here in New Orleans. I guess they're also visiting the city, but we were largely staying with our friend Pat and his family, and just had an awesome time. And this game, the word I've been thinking a lot about was cathartic. This was cathartic relief for every person that came to New Orleans this week. It was a joyful, electric, pumped atmosphere for both sides. Like, credit Georgia fans, credit Notre Dame fans. Like, the stadium was loud. I thought it was about 60-40 Georgia fans to Notre Dame. I was a little worried about that coming in, knowing, Ann and I live in Atlanta. We drove down for the game. Like, it's very easy to drive here from Atlanta. So I was a little worried there'd be a sea of red. Wasn't the case. It was a pretty split stadium and just a great sporting environment when I thought we really needed it. Ann and I are sitting in a hotel room that is overlooking Bourbon Street and Canal, where a horrific incident obviously occurred in the terrorism act this week. And um, it sucked. Like, it was a really tough couple of days being in the city. It was eerily quiet. You're sad, you're angry, you're whatever you're feeling out there. If you're listening to this show, by the way, and you're feeling it all, I get you. Like, it was a really, really hard week. And there was a moment to pull the city together. There was a moment to pull our country together. And I thought that was really cool to be a part of Notre Dame in that moment. In fact, I thought Marcus Freeman had a phenomenal interview on SportsCenter the night before the game, talking about what it means to be Notre Dame's coach, what it means to lead this team, what it means to be there for them first, about everything having to do with the off the field situation and making sure they're getting the support they need. And then second, help them prepare for a game. But that is very much priority one versus priority two for him. I thought Notre Dame's president, Father Dowd, had a really great quote. I just wanted to read it. To be in solidarity with those who suffer is to exemplify the spirit of Notre Dame. Today, we are in solidarity with all those impacted by this tragedy. Like, this was very much a moment to bring a community together in a really, really awesome way, in a really awesome environment. So I just wanted to start the show by touching on that of I just thought a really, really great human experience, way, way, way beyond what you and I might talk about week in and week out related to Notre Dame football. It felt like this had way, way bigger implications for just bringing everyone back together and help that healing process.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Um,
it was scary. I mean, that is the
yeah,
worst thing that I could have woken up to that day. I woke up and I saw that there was a terrorist attack in New Orleans where my brother and dad were driving to. I didn't know exactly when they were going to be getting there. Fortunately, they were driving in the morning, but I knew you were there, and I knew a bunch of other people were there. So I guess, like, fortunately for me, when I woke up, I woke up a little bit later, so a lot of the check-in texts, seeing if people were okay, had already happened. So as soon as I saw that the terrorist attack had happened, I was able to see that you were okay, and our friends were. But I mean, that just a horrific, horrific event. Something that reminds you, to take stock of what's important in life, and keep in mind what's really important. But yeah, Brett, I totally agree. I think the way that Marcus Freeman responded, I think the way that just Georgia, like, honestly, just the way that everybody responded, Georgia, Notre Dame, Father Dowd, I think everyone, I think that they were very eloquent with their messaging on how to, how to take stock of everything that had happened. But yeah, still very, very scary. And yeah, it's again, just another, it's a reminder that as much as we love college football, as much as we love, these big moments, it does pale in comparison to, you know, uh, to moments like that.
100%. And I always think sports is a great way to heal. Sports is a great way to bring people together. And certainly times of tragedy like this, it was great to experience. Um, Certainly the coming together after such a big tragedy. Moving into the game, um, man, the special teams. Didn't think this is where we're going to start the show. We talked about this in the preview, that we thought this was an area where maybe the data was wrong. The data was saying Notre Dame was the 104th special teams unit in the country, but we've had an injured kicker all year. Georgia is a top 10 special teams unit in the country, and the advanced metric says that's a 3-point edge for Georgia. In this game, Mike, the special teams was incredibly one-sided. Obviously, the big kick return, there was the 11-man substitution. We'll get to that in a second, on whether or not that was the correct officiating. There was 3 massive field goals from Mitch Jeter. How do you put that into context? Was this what you expected? Was it shocking? Like, is this truly what differentiated the game? Like, just can't believe we're starting the show this way on the football side of things, but walk me through your thoughts on the special teams today.
I love that we're talking about how special teams really helped tilt the balance in this game. Because going in, I mean, we mentioned the advanced metrics said that our offense and defense were the better units. That's what SP Plus said. It said that we had the edge over Georgia in those areas, but then Georgia technically should be favored on a neutral field because as you mentioned, Brett, their special teams had such a differential over ours. But Mitch Jeter was unhealthy most of the year, and we know that when he's healthy, he's an effective kicker. I thought it was a great sign when he came out at the beginning of the game and he was on kickoff duty. That to me, the fact that he was kicking off told me, okay, it looks like Mitch Jeter is finally fully healthy, because those are the kicks where you just need to generate a lot of power. And you are absolutely not putting a kicker that's maybe even a little injured on kickoff duty unless he's fully good to go. So to me, that was a great sign. And SP Plus had us as, I think you said, 104th. Today, we played like a top 10 special teams unit. And it was the difference in the game. Look, we got 3 field goals from Mitch Jeter, and this was a hard, scrappy game, as we expected. And special teams, like, those points were absolutely critical. And then you look at these other elements that we had. The kick return. I wish I was there at the Sugar Bowl with you, because I
It
think
was
that
unreal.
moment that was the moment where that was where I first. I think that's where I think the realization first hit me, where I was like, oh, you know what? Right now, I actually think Notre Dame's going to win this game. Like, when we were up 10 going into the half, and my thought process at the time was like, okay, like, I feel pretty good, like, but there's still a lot of time to go. When we get that kick return for a touchdown, that changed my mindset. I was from that point on, I was believing. Look, and I was a believer, before that, but at that point, I feel like my conviction was had reached a whole nother level that we were going to win the game. I mean, when they kicked it off, I remember looking over at my wife, and I made a comment. I was like, okay, it's a short kick. We might be able to return that. And then shortly after he caught it, I saw space open up after he had that missed tackle, and that realization that he had a lot of room to work with, and that he potentially was going to return to the house, man, that was just a lot of fun. I can't even imagine what it was like for you guys there, and I know you guys had a great view on it. So I mean, it was just just a phenomenal moment. And then even just the other elements of special teams, like you mentioned, like the shift where we caused them to jump off sides. And we'll get more into this later, but Brett and I have seen an explanation that tells you that Notre Dame was actually potentially correct in what they did, and they were actually just ahead of the curve on the rules here, as opposed to getting the benefit of a no call. But I think just across the board, it was like, whether it's the chess match, whether it's field goal kicking, whether it's generating big plays, special teams showed up in a really big way. And we also didn't allow Georgia to have any meaningful returns. I remember they had one kick return, and then we stopped them short of the 20. They really weren't getting any meaningful production on their end either. So just any way you want to put it, this was not the 104th special teams unit in the country. This looked like a lot like a top 10 unit.
It's interesting, like, in all phases of special teams. Like, I thought this was the best game for James Rendell. He had 5 punts. He averaged 43 yards, and they had 1 punt return longer than 6. So, like, he was netting 42 yards. Like, this was a great game for our punt team. Um, on that kickoff return by Harrison, it was right in front of us. We were sitting at the 25-yard line, and he broke it right around the 20. And the blocking was impeccable after he made that first guy miss. Turned the corner, and, like, it was just immediately, like, you knew it wasn't a big gap. Like, that wasn't the biggest lane in the world, but it was enough.
Yeah.
And he hit it hard and took it to the house. And we talk a lot about explosiveness being about offense. That was the most explosive play of the game. That was the most pivotal play in this game, was that kickoff return for a touchdown. Just a huge moment for Notre Dame to really go and take that from a 10-point game where it felt like Georgia was mad after the first half, and came out and really knocked them in the mouth, quieted the crowd, and took over the game.
Yeah.
I
And
think it's
Brett,
what
you didn't see this, but right after on the broadcast, so right after that kick return, they kept panning in on this Georgia fan, and it was like the most depressed fan face I've
oh
ever seen
no.
in my life. Honestly, it'll probably be a meme. They showed her like a few times.
Oh no.
I was like, wow, how great is it to be on the other side of this for once?
That's amazing. So it's worth spending a minute on the refs. It was a pretty tough watch in the game. And I've since gone back and, it's a tough watch as a fan in the stadium when, the replays are never perfect when you're in a stadium situation. You look up and there's 9 penalties on your team against, I think it was only 3 or 4 for Georgia at one point in the game. And I then started looking on social media and, some of the evaluation after the game. And it sounds like actually the Georgia fans were the ones more upset than we were. And so I kind of had a double take. And so Kirby was fuming both during the game and after the game on that 11-man substitution where Notre Dame ran out our punt unit and then all 11 guys sprinted off the field and 11 offensive guys came back on. And we faked going for it. They jumped offside. We took a deep shot, took the 5 yards, got a first down. Pivotal play in the game versus them possibly getting the ball back at midfield. And the explanation that I've seen online is that you cannot sub 11 guys all at once like that to try to throw off the defense. But it's once the ball is in play. And that's defined as once the center touches the football. So like once the center goes over the ball, touches the ball, at that point you can't sub out all 11 guys. And so I don't know if that explanation is correct or not, just to be clear. Like I haven't gone and evaluated that in the rule book. But this felt like a very obvious Freeman pre-cleared the play with the officiating crew before the game. Called it, ran it very well. Georgia was slow to react. They were caught off guards. The interesting part is there's a lot of people on social media saying Jadarian Price committed a false start on that play. I went back and looked at it. Jadarian Price definitely jumped, but he jumped after the Georgia guy went in the neutral zone. So you could have argued they should have blown the play dead and called a false start. I don't think it was called an offsides. They shouldn't have called a false start, though. I think if anything, Jadarian Price was induced, but because he was induced, maybe we shouldn't have had the free play, but the free play was an incompletion. It didn't matter. So I don't know for sure. Kirby was clearly really upset about it. But when I step back and look at the rest of the game, there was a very weak PI called against us on the first play of the game. We got called for an illegal shift that negated a fourth down conversion on Jordan Faison that I thought he was set enough, but in the very least, the only reason was because he was uncovering the cover tight end when Mitch Evans slotted forward. So I actually thought it was a mental mistake on our part. If Mitch Evans doesn't move up to the line to go into the covered tight end position, it wouldn't have mattered if Faison was in motion or if he was set. So I thought that was a mental miscue on our part regardless. But then on the other side, that was a very, very questionable call. There's a blatant missed face mask on Riley Leonard's big run where it was just a very, very blatant face mask. So I felt like there were 3-4 calls that went against us. There's another call where I thought Jack Kaiser was in phenomenal coverage on a terrible throw. And yes, he didn't turn around, but I don't think Kaiser really made contact before that ball got there. Or in the very least, it was super bang bang. And that was on a 4th and 12 that really kept Georgia's only scoring drive going in this game. So looking back on all of those plays now, slowing things down, I thought it was a better officiated call, a better officiated game called than what I saw live. But Mike, I'm curious, you watching it on TV, you getting to hear the broadcast, what did you think about the officiating taken as a whole?
I mean, I think when you're saying it was better officiated than what you saw live, I still don't think that means it was a well officiated game. It just wasn't a disaster. Because look, I mean, you mentioned the illegal shift. They brought on the rules analyst, and he disagreed. He thought it was a bit of a ticky tack call. He thought he essentially insinuated that if you're really, really looking to call a penalty, then yeah, maybe you could call something. But yeah, he didn't seem to like the call at all, and he didn't agree with it. Yeah, you mentioned the face mask, clear as day. They showed that replay a bunch of times, and you could see that he clearly grabbed the face mask. You mentioned that PI early on. Technically, so the thing is, yeah, I mean, look, I can't argue with that one too much because technically he was grabbing the jersey a little bit, and whenever you grab the jersey, they can always call that. But it was weak. I mean, when I watched it, it was. I was a bit surprised that they called that. It seemed like one that you probably would be able to get away with, but yeah. Look, overall, I think it was probably not the best officiated game. I think there are a number of questionable calls on both sides, and for ones that maybe even that they got right, it doesn't seem like there was a great explanation for it, and it left a lot of confusion. I mean, I think an example would be that 11-man substitution. It seems like we, again, Brett, as you said, we haven't confirmed it 100%, but it seems like the type of play that Freeman would have confirmed beforehand. We generally do that with these types of plays, and we wouldn't have run it if we thought that it would have run afoul of the rules. And the explanations you're finding seem to confirm that. So, but it would have been nice to, it could have been more, it could have been better communicated what was going on. So, yeah, I think my take was, yeah, not their best, not maybe not a disaster, but definitely not a well officiated game. And I think if I was there live, I probably be, I think my live reaction probably would have been very similar to yours.
So the other thing that I wanted to spend some time talking to, I'm really curious your perspective watching the game on the broadcast because I think this is something that's kind of hard to see inside the stadium is overall thoughts on Den Brock's play calling. And then the second question that I want to get to related to that is how did Riley Leonard play in this game? Because you look up, we only had 240 yards of offense, like not the output. If you'd have said Notre Dame has 240 yards of offense, do we win this game? I would have said, hell no. Like, no chance Notre Dame's winning. But we got a touchdown on a short field. We got a touchdown on a kickoff return. Those also limited our opportunities.
Yeah.
And we also had 2 or 3 drives to start this game with penalties that moved us back behind the chains. We were pinned deep. And it was a little bit of like a look, let's just punt the ball and move on. And at some point in the game, we wound up winning time of possession. At one point in this game, we were losing time of possession like 18-4. Like it was absurd how much Georgia was controlling field position, situational football. And so my perspective, again, in the stadium without kind of being able to step back and look like an all 22 film is very much a view of Den Brock called the game he needed to call. No mistakes, despite the penalties. I think we only took 1 sack. I think Georgia only had like 4 tackles for loss or something I got it pulled up here. Sorry, I didn't even know this. Georgia had 1 tackle for loss. So I get it. We didn't keep moving the chains, but we weren't going backwards. We weren't getting disrupted. We weren't giving them momentum. We weren't letting them flip the field. I thought Den Brock called what this game necessitated, and it wasn't
Yep.
pretty, but it was relying on our defense to go win it. It was relying on us to beat up on an inexperienced quarterback who I thought Gunnar Stockton balled out for his first start. So tip of the hat to that guy. But I stepped back and looked at this game. I was like, you know what? It wasn't great. It wasn't pretty. But Georgia's defense was selling out and saying, number 4 is not going to stop us. Like it almost felt like Jalen Walker was spying on Jeremiah Love. I actually don't know if I've ever seen that before where they're spying on the running back, not on the quarterback. Like they just said, you're not going to beat us trying to do what Notre Dame does. You're going to have to beat us throwing the ball. You're going to have to beat us making mistakes. And we did. We took advantage of their mistakes. So I felt like Den Brock took what the defense gave them, didn't force it, and made enough plays to control this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So my summary is the special teams and the defense won us the game, and the offense did enough to not lose us the game. They did enough to get us points to let us come home with the victory. So yeah, Brett, I think you said it perfectly. It did seem like they had a spy on Jeremiah Love. I think they've seen the tape. They know that he's a guy, if you give him even just a little crack of space, he's a guy who can spring a 98-yard touchdown. And they basically just said, you know what, you're not going to do that. And then I think just in general, their mindset was, we're going to crowd the box. You're not going to run on us. Although it's not like we had a horrible running game. Like we were able to get some yards. A lot of that was through Riley Leonard. And they were going to play aggressive man defense. And look, to their credit, they heavily limited our passing game. Their corners were blanketing our receivers. There were a couple of replays they showed where I would say it was some pretty aggressive defense. I think you definitely could have gotten some pass interference calls there if you had a referee that was maybe a little bit more prone to that. But the strategy, it
Very
generally worked.
way to say that the refs sucked.
Look, they even said it on the broadcast. I mean, McElroy, there was one, I think it was Bo Collins. I forgot when, maybe it was in the second or the third quarter. But yeah, I mean, the Georgia corner was all over him. And McElroy, they brought in the rules analyst, and he's like, if you had a ref who was, a little bit more prone to calling pass interference, he's like, that seems like something that they would call. He's like, but, but they're kind of letting them play more aggressive defense there. And the strategy generally worked. It's not like, look, I mean, Georgia is, we called it out, they're a top 10 defense per SP plus. Realistically, with the potential and the talent that they have, they're capable of probably playing more like a top 3 defense on any given day. And I think we probably saw a little bit more of that today, particularly from their pass rush. I think my evaluation was, yeah, like I said, I think Denbrock did enough. Like it's a little tricky to evaluate because we had the penalties, and you can always blame the offensive coordinator and the coach for the penalties. But those penalties early on, they were absolute drive killers. They put us in, third and long situations against a Georgia defense that is phenomenal at pass rushing. And in that situation, honestly, I mean, frankly, you're just not going to convert most of the time, and we didn't. But we did enough to take advantage of the opportunities that we got. So when we got a short field, we were able to get the touchdown. We are able to get enough yards to get the field goal, to get a few field goals, and that was enough to win the game. So I think Denbrock and Leonard, they just, they were able to, limit any sort of like critical mistakes and allow us to like kind of ride the backs of the special teams and the defense. I think Leonard in particular. Look, I mean, when I looked at the stats, Georgia got a ton of pressure on Riley Leonard, and he really struggled against pressure today. That was an area that we've called out in the past that he, tends to struggle against is when he's pressured. He'd done a little bit better in the last couple games, but I mean, like when I was watching the game, it seemed like Georgia was in his face all the time. But to Riley Leonard's credit, he didn't allow them to convert any of that pressure into like sacks, interceptions, turnovers, anything like that. We weren't converting them to successful plays, but we weren't allowing Georgia to, generate any sort of like game-changing type plays. And I think, like, to Denbrock's credit, even though we were dealing with a lot of pressure, like, I think his play calling also gets some credit here too. He wasn't putting us in situations where we'd be in a position that would be more, would be more likely that we would have some sort of like turnover or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think overall, just kind of putting all that together, it's kind of like I said, they did enough for us to win the game. It was not, look, I can't say that it was a great performance. It was good enough to win the game, and we got stellar performances from other parts of the team.
So we questioned whether or not we thought this was the same Kirby Smart defense of old that was, consistently number one in the country. Their front seven was dominant. They generated pressures on 43% of Riley Leonard's dropbacks. Every other time Riley Leonard was dropping back to throw the ball, he was under duress, and they weren't blitzing a ton. Like I can look this up right now. They blitzed, I guess they blitzed 46% of the time. And when they
Yeah.
blitzed, they got home. Like 43% of the time, they got home on Riley Leonard. And on those pass attempts, he completed yardage for 0.7 yards per attempt. He had a grand total of 6 yards on those dropbacks and was just under duress the whole game.
They were total blowups. That's the thing. Yeah, Brent, a
Total.
lot of them, it was just like he didn't even have time to look for a receiver. He just had to throw it away. And to his credit, he did. He avoided a sack. But, I mean, there was just, the play was dead.
And our running backs had 1.3 yards before contact. Like a good offensive line needs to be making that 2.5 to 3 yards. So if I've got one question, by the way, about Notre Dame going forward, it's actually like going up against Penn State and Ohio State's defensive front actually scares me. Like our offensive line did not look good in this game. And at the end of the day, if your offensive line is just getting blown off the ball, it doesn't really matter what the coordinator is going to call. And so I think that was a really, really big part of this game that I have a hard time blaming on Denbrock. I have a hard time blaming on Leonard. Like we were just under duress and they did enough to win the game. And so moving over to the defense, look, we're going to get into Pro Football Focus grades. We're going to get into kind of the formula of what won this game. And it was clearly on the defensive side of the football. But first and foremost, Junior Tuihalamaka in person was the best athlete on the field. He was destructive. They could not block number 44. He led the team in pressures. He had a massive sack. He was all over the field in this game, in flushing Gunnar Stockton, in staying contained, in pushing and containing the edge in the run game. Like, regardless of what Pro Football Focus grades say, regardless of what Xavier Watts wins for leading the team in tackles, which I thought X played a great game. Junior Tuilamaka was the best player on this football field, and it's why they should just stop having MVP awards. It's just dumb to hand them out to anyone who wasn't wearing number 44 in this game, or we were just watching a totally different game. I thought for the Riley Mills injury, for Botello going down, for Boubacar Traore going down, for Ben Morse, all the injuries this defense has had, what a day for Junior Tuilamaka. So I wanted to give him a massive shout out. Mike, after that, this is like every other game we've talked about for this defense where they are so dominant in numbers. Like they are so dominant in the depth of awesome contributors. Who stood out from your perspective? And I think we could probably pick 15 guys, but if there's just a list you want to rattle through as you kind of step back and watch the game, Junior was my guy of the game. I'm curious what you saw.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's the story of the defense this year is that we are so deep that we can lose some of our top impact players and not really have much of a drop off just because we have so many strong contributors littered throughout the entire defense. And I agree with Tuilamaka. He had some big plays. But there were also a lot of plays where he was pretty close to sacking Gunnar Stockton, and Stockton just narrowly got it off. So there were a handful of plays where he had just near misses towards like other impact plays. But getting into some other guys who were impactful, I mentioned there were a ton of them, which just tells you how great our defense played today. Start with Leonard Moore, true freshman. We keep saying that. This is just a perfect example. You have Benjamin Morrison go down, then the next guy who steps up is a true freshman, comes in, and I think it's pretty clear that he's our next stud at corner. I think it's pretty fair to say at this point. Five of eight. He was targeted 8 times, 5 completions, but only for 22 yards. So he gave up, 5 completions, but really, really kind of like dink and dunk type passes. Not stuff that really moves the needle, not stuff that really puts Georgia in a position to score. I thought Adon Schuler, he had a great game. He's been a phenomenal performer for us this year. 7 tackles, 4 were stops. That's a metric on Pro Football Focus that it's not necessarily a havoc play, but essentially what it means is you're kind of preventing the offense from, I guess, getting in a more favorable position. It's like you're kind of preventing a successful play, essentially. RJ Oben, so he actually had the best Pro Football Focus grade, on the entire team, I believe. And phenomenal. He had that sack at the end of the game. He graded out as a 91. That's an elite grade. RJ Oben is someone who is at various points this year, maybe not quite been as impactful as we were hoping, but he certainly was this game. And I mean, boy, what better opponent to do it against an elite Georgia SEC team in the Sugar Bowl? Great to see it, and hopefully this will be a something that we'll continue to see against Penn State, and then hopefully in the national championship. Jalen Sneed's another one I'm going to call
By
out.
the way, I got a quick RJ Obed story from in the
Oh
game,
yeah,
which I'm so sorry for everyone who's listening to this on podcast and not watching us on YouTube. Go check us out on YouTube and watch the video. But do you know when the band does the da 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 da? Okay, that thing. I'll stop singing it. RJ Oben, every time the band was doing that, he was doing it like on the field snap. And then like we'd go get in his stance and be like, all right, let's play football. And we just light guys up. And it was like, okay, man, whatever you're doing, keep doing your little leprechaun fist bumps with the crowd because it's working. And like I just thought that was a really fun example of like Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman football is just a joy to watch. But you had like RJ Open out there doing the leprechaun fist bumps and then going after Georgia.
dude, and great to see it from a transfer. Also great, like the other Duke transfer, Riley Leonard. He's the one who gets all the attention. I mean, we have another
Go to hell,
transfer
Duke.
from Duke. What's that? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you're obligated to say that because of Ann.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, RJ Oben, not as
Who's our other
impactful.
Duke transfer? Do I know him?
What?
Who's the other Duke transfer? It's RJ Open. I don't know the other one.
Yeah, who is it? Is he? It's
I
not the
forget.
quarterback, right? No way,
Is
it's
it?
the quarterback.
Amazing.
um, yeah, but RJ Oben, yeah, great to see someone like him step up because he had received some criticism for maybe not being as productive as we'd hoped, but certainly was today. Jalen
Big
Sneed, someone who's really turned it on this year. 1 tackle, not a ton. So obviously not a ton of production from a tackle standpoint, but 3 pressures. So it's like one of those scenarios where, again, from a tackle standpoint, it's not like he's flying off the stat sheet, but when you watch the game, he was someone who was around the ball constantly, really making an impact, through that way. And then Jordan Clark, so he's targeted 4 times, 3 completions. But he had a massive pass deflection on third down. So, and again, and in these, in these attempts against him, he wasn't giving up many yards. So, like, I think that's another key is some of these guys like Gunnar Stockton. He had a couple big plays, but for the most part, it was mostly dink and dunk. It was like a couple yards here and there. So you'll hear like three for 4. I mentioned Leonard Moore 5 for 8, but they weren't really like plays that were moving the needle a whole lot. It's the type of plays that we were generally okay giving up, and they're the type of plays that you want to force the offense to have to convert over and over and over again to move downfield, because odds are they're going to make a mistake at some point, which they did occasionally. So I think, yeah, I mean, look, Jordan Clark's been phenomenal for us this year. And look, he had another strong game. I thought Heinisch, Rubio, and Cross, they all graded out okay, but played an absurd amount of snaps. And I think they held up okay. Like, obviously, we kept the run game in check. We were able to get some pressure on Stockton, generate some big plays. And then and this is a group stat for everybody. This is a stat that we always talk about, tackling. I think it's a great barometer for just how fundamental and how disciplined your defense is playing. We only had 4 missed tackles. Incredible. 7% missed tackle rate. And that's against Georgia, which unquestionably has some of the best athletes in all of college football. They played, just as another comp here from the same game, Georgia had 8 missed tackles. And I mean, just watching them, I mean, I'm going to give credit to Georgia where it's due. I thought their defense played lights out. But we had, as lights out as they played, we had even fewer missed tackles than they did. So as you mentioned, Brett, it's just, you go down the defense and it's just, there are too many people to name who had strong performances. It's just a strong group effort. That's been the case all year. It's like we have one of our impact players go down, the next guy comes in, we don't really miss a beat. And credit to Al Golden, credit to Marcus Freeman. It's just, we haven't seen this level of depth. Honestly, for me, I've never seen this level of depth from the Notre Dame program. I keep thinking back to when we played Clemson and Julian Love went down, for like, what was it, like a quarter or two? And we lose one player for like a period of time during the game. And that cost us the game because there was such a strong drop off from that one player to the backup that they quickly scored like 2 touchdowns or something like that. This team, not the case. We drop an impact player, next guy steps in and performs at an extremely high level. It's look, I think that's it's a big story for the season. It's a big story for the game. And if you're looking forward to the semis, potentially even the championship, it's got to make you feel good about the defense moving forward.
Yeah, and if you think about what all of that translated in that group effort, the name of the game was Notre Dame's defensive havoc. So we talk all the time about, can offenses stay on schedule to generate drives? Can they generate a success rate? In this game, the defenses on both sides of the ball dominated. Notre Dame had a 33% success rate. Georgia had a 35% success rate. If you'd have told me Notre Dame's offense had a 33% success rate, Riley Leonard doesn't throw for 100 yards, and Jeremiah Love has 20 yards rushing, how would it go? I would have said awful. Like, I'd have said terrible. But it was even more so true on the other side, where they had a 35% success rate. So they didn't stay on schedule either. Offenses want to be in the mid to high 40s in that number. Both offenses here were in the mid to low 30s. Then you look at explosiveness. They had the 67-yard play. They had the big play to Arian Smith. They also dropped a massive touchdown in this game. We talked about Georgia being number 3 in the country in drops, and they dropped a walk-in touchdown, and I don't believe they scored on that drive. Like, it was a huge game changer for them to drop that ball. So it cuts both ways, but they didn't generate enough explosiveness to overcome a 35% success rate. By the way, neither did our offense. We only had 1 play over 15 yards in this game. I believe they had 4. So they won explosiveness, but not in a big way. It's not like, they had 4 or 5 long, big home run plays. They had 1. And then the havoc. So havoc rate hasn't come out yet. Can't tell you what it is. It was incredibly high for Notre Dame. We had 9 tackles for loss in this game. We sacked Gunnar Stockton 4 times. We had 4 passes broken up. We had the 2 huge fumbles to go win this football game and put points on the board. On the other side, this is where we said Denbrock and Leonard did what they needed to do situationally in this game. Only took one sack. It was the only tackle for loss in this game for Notre Dame's offense. It was the only time that a disruptive play happened. Yes, there were a couple batted passes, but there were 0 turnovers, and we didn't move backwards. On the other side, we moved them backwards constantly. Like we were putting them in 2nd and 12, 3rd and 13. Like we were winning situational football because of havoc. And I can't remember a game where Notre Dame, if we talk about why did Notre Dame look like they belonged, they won. Like as much as the line of scrimmage got dominated, our offensive line got blown off the ball, they got blown off the ball to neutral. Like they weren't, pushing Georgia's defense backwards, but they also weren't getting pushed backwards all that often. Like it was just like, okay, a bunch of 0, 1, and 2 yard runs. Georgia's offensive line got moved the wrong way continually by Al Golden's defense. And it absolutely won this game where we just kept hitting them behind the line of scrimmage time and time and time again. That havoc metric of 9 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, that is the game. That is the entire game. That was the biggest mismatch in this game that hasn't happened when we've played Clemson. That hasn't happened when we've played Alabama. We haven't even played that stat neutral in big games. Like I think if you would have just said, hey, if we're tied in tackles for loss, how you feeling about this game? I'd say it's a coin flip. If you said tackles for loss are 9-1 who wins the game, it's going to be the team with 9 every single time when you just disrupt the other team that consistently.
Yeah, Brett. So I think you'll appreciate this. In the broadcast, in the pregame, they were talking to people like Tim Tebow, and when they were giving their keys to the game, Tebow was saying, he's like, look, Georgia's offensive line. He's like, these are some big fellas, which they are. He's like, I expect them to be able to wear down Notre Dame's defensive front as the game goes on. When you got to halftime, they asked him the same thing. He's like, actually, you know what? He's like, Georgia, I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball on Notre Dame. He's like, they're going to need the receivers to try to generate some separation and air it deep. So it was just interesting kind of going into the game. That was the perspective. And then he watched the half and he's like, oh, okay. Like that's definitely not going to happen. Notre Dame's defensive front is holding up okay as we saw in the run, but also just in terms of generating just disruption as a whole. So yeah, totally. That was the key to the game. I mean, if you look at the success rates, our success rate was pretty similar to Georgia's. Both were pretty low. Explosiveness was pretty low. Georgia had those 2 big plays. But other than that, as I mentioned before in their passing game, it was mostly just like dink and dunk type passes. They weren't getting a whole lot in the running game. The key differentiator in this game, it really was just the havoc that we generated. So that was the key to the game. I mean, the post game. If you look at the post game win expectancy, which kind of combines all these different key metrics, says Notre Dame should win this 59% of the time. So per the advanced metrics, this was a game that like Notre Dame definitely outplayed Georgia. But it wasn't really in the success from a success rate standpoint or explosiveness standpoint. It was from a havoc standpoint. And again, it's you have an experienced defensive unit led by Al Golden. They know his scheme extremely well. They have a lot of wrinkles that they can add. And as I mentioned before in my prior comments, it's just like tremendous depth. We just have a lot that we can throw in an offense. And that's exactly what you saw today. And that's exactly what drove the havoc, which is what won us the game.
Mike, I'm curious what you think about Marcus Freeman, what this means for him, the program, how you evaluate him overall. But I'll maybe start with my take on that question. I had a tweet during the game that I thought Marcus Freeman Kirby'd Kirby. He won situational football. And a great metric for that is the middle 8. Coaches talk about the middle 8 all the time. The last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. So your time to win situational football with clock management and your time to take advantage of in-game adjustments. And Notre Dame has excelled in this area all year. So if you look at those last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, only once all year did Notre Dame lose the middle 8, and that was against NIU. We lost the middle 8 6-0, and we lost by 2. Every other game, we either tied or won the middle 8. And in fact, on the season, in those 8 minutes of football, we have outscored opponents 145-19. we've outscored them at a ratio of 7.6. We've scored 7.6 more points than the opponent in the middle eight. And for context, in the rest of the 52 minutes of football, we've also outscored our opponents 360 to 161, but that's only 2.2x. So in the other 52 minutes of football, we are 2.2 times better than the other team. But in that middle eight, we have been 7.6 times better than the other team. That is a huge advantage in situational football. In this game, we have the field goal, manage the end of clock situation really well to set up Mitch Jeter. We take 3 points. We think we're going to the half with the lead and get the ball back. Georgia gets aggressive, makes a mistake. We take advantage and go score 7. And we come right back with a great special teams execution and go and score a touchdown. And we won the middle eight in this game 17-0. If you remove the middle eight, we lost this football game 10-6. It was situational football. It was clock management. It was halftime adjustments. It was special teams execution. It was coaching that won the middle eight when Notre Dame had a 17-point advantage. And the rest of the game was a great, tough, grinded out football game. But that situational football won. So I think the middle eight is a huge storyline to like be the epitome of what Marcus Freeman has accomplished as a third-year coach. I'm curious if you step back and just say, okay, so we're saying this is the biggest win since 93. Like, this is the biggest win for Notre Dame football in 31 years. Like, how do you put that in context for Marcus Freeman?
Well, something that we observed when Marcus Freeman was hired, and look, we were really excited when he was hired. We thought it was the right move. You know, he's the guy who could kind of, I think, bring everyone together. Really energize the program. But something that we called out was that someone like Brian Kelly, he offered a lot of safety, he offered a lot of certainty, and he offered a high floor, but a pretty limited ceiling. We knew what that ceiling was. It's, look, we could win 10 or 11 games, and then we could get to the game where we would play a team like the SEC champion, like Georgia. But then when we get to that game, we're probably going to be 2 touchdown underdogs, and we're probably going to lose that game. But you can rely on the 10 to 11 wins year in, year out. With Marcus Freeman, at the time, we believe that he offered a much higher ceiling, but clearly he was inexperienced, had never been a head coach, so there was much higher risk. So from our standpoint, I think what we felt at the time was, okay, look, I think it's the program is in a place where you can hire someone like this. You can take that risk and maybe it'll pay off, but there could be some bumps in the road and we don't know for sure if this is going to work. And I think the last 3 years have really shown us both sides of that. So we have losses like the loss to NIU, right? That shows you the inexperience of a relatively newer coach. That shows you the risk side of the coin. But that risk side of the coin, I think, is well worth it for what happened today, because that reward, that high ceiling that you get with Marcus Freeman, someone who can really energize the program, who can bring on the best coaching staff that we've had since I've been a fan of the team, someone who can really just get total buy-in from a program, who can get a program to just elevate itself to a level that it hasn't in 31 years. That's the reward side of the coin. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. We experienced some of the risk the last couple of years, but now we're finally seeing what this program can be when you have someone who's able to elevate it. And that's exactly what we thought Marcus Freeman could be. It's not like we were certain that he was going to be able to do it, but he seemed like someone who's capable of doing it. And I think we're seeing that happen right now. I mean, what better statement than to eliminate the Georgia Bulldogs, who have won 2 of the last 3 national championships? I'm still in a bit of disbelief that I'm even saying that. And then also in the manner that we won. So we held up on both sides of the ball. Look, our offense didn't have their best game. Our defense and special teams certainly had quite a performance. But Freeman also, he outfoxed Kirby multiple times. I mean, you mentioned that substitution where we forced them off sides. I mean, the broadcast, when that happened, like McElroy was like, wow. He's like, credit to Marcus Freeman. This was quite a head coaching job in game today. And that was an area where we would criticize Marcus Freeman a little bit in the past. So look, he was aggressive for it in the right situations. We didn't get that 1 4th down, but I think it was the right call to go for it. I would say I really don't have anything to criticize him for in this game, which is something to say. And I think when you have, when the end result of the game is that you have a bunch of SEC fans complaining about the refs, that's a telltale sign that you did something right. So I had a lot of thoughts right there, but I think my summary is this game is Marcus Freeman arriving as a big time head coach. We thought he had the potential, and we've been seeing him continue to grow as a head coach. And this is a moment where he brought it, whether it was just having the team ready to play, or whether it was just coming up with a couple clever, couple clever tactics to throw the Georgia, the Georgia coaches off. I mean, I think any aspect you want to analyze it, this was a big moment, and he showed up in a big time way.
So I have a really fun story that I think defines how fun it is to cheer for a Marcus Freeman team. And it's an inside tip as a fan that I recommend for any sports fan of any sport. If you see a group of people all wearing the same jersey, and it's not the quarterback, it's not Riley Leonard, it's not the running back, it's not Jeremiah Love, but you just see four people sitting there saying, for example, wearing Anthony Knapp's jersey. Good chance it's Anthony Knapp's family.
Yep.
Stan and I actually met Anthony Knapp's parents in the Atlanta airport after the Texas A&M game. We didn't even go to the A&M game, but we had a flight back from a wedding at the same time as Anthony's family, and he's an Atlanta kid, and we're like, oh, that's got to be his parents. And I introduced myself to them, and we had a great conversation. Did the same thing with Jordan Love's mom when Jordan Love was a first-year starter in the NFL. Asked for autograph, and she's like, no one's ever asked for my autograph before. Just had a great conversation with Jordan Love's mom. Did the same thing tonight with Deion Colsey. Met his parents, walked back to the hotel where we're staying with Deion Colsey's parents. And I've got an inside tip for everyone that does that. Just thank them. Thank them for raising a really fun kid that you love cheering for, and you will open up some really, really, really cool conversations and just make people's day. So I'm a little sentimental. It's been a long week in New Orleans, and I'm about to say a story about meeting Charles Jugusah's mom and grandparents. It was this little old couple. There were three of them all wearing Charles Jugusah's jersey. We were walking out of the stadium. And for those of our listeners that don't know Charles, he is Notre Dame's third highest recruit on the team. Third highest recruit, almost a 5-star, number 46 recruit in his class, with all of the aspirations to play in the NFL. Like legit blue chip guy, deserves to play on Sundays. And last year, he didn't get to play a single snap in the regular season because he was behind Blake Fisher and Joe Alt, who are both starting in the NFL this week. He got hosed, being benched behind two phenomenally great offensive tackles. Every reason in the world to say, screw this place, I want to transfer, or I want to go take NIL money, or I'm upset that I'm not playing. All the reason in the world to be upset. This year, he tears his pec in fall camp in August and doesn't play at all this year. He's announced out for the season. He got cleared to play for this game. So he's back. And the offensive line's been beat up. Ashton Craig's out. Rocco Spindler's been dealing with injuries. Like, there's a chance for Charles Jugusah to play in this game. And he hasn't played all year. And he's arguably our best offensive lineman, but bringing him in now to, introduce a new wrinkle, a new gel. And so I just looked at his mom and said, I bet it really sucks to be a mom watching your son get hurt and not get a chance to play in this huge game. But I bet it was really awesome to get to support him and be here tonight. And her response shook me in such a positive way about Marcus Freeman in this program. And she said, you know what? We talked to Charles this week and I asked him if he was bummed out that he wasn't going to get to play because he knew he wasn't playing. And he told his mom that. And his answer was, when we've watched Georgia on film, we've figured out one thing as a team. We are here so that our teammates can win a game, and Georgia is here so that they individually can get to the NFL. This kid has had the worst luck for a college athlete, and he's not getting to play in the biggest game of his career, and he's arguably the third most talented guy on the team. And his response is, Mom, it's all good. I want this game for my teammates, and that's what makes us different than the other side of the ball. Hearing that story, that's authentic. That's not post-game. That's not to the media. That's not whatever jargon you say in front of a camera. That's what you're saying to your family. And it just permeates every single thing about Marcus Freeman and what he's built in this program and what these guys believe in. And I just I love being their fan. I was so happy today. I've been so happy all season. And so, Charles, your mom, your grandparents, you are all wonderful people. thank you for making my night. Thank you for making my week after a really, really long week here in New Orleans. But if that doesn't embody what Notre Dame football is all about, I got nothing. It was such a cool conversation.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have no transfer. No one has entered the transfer portal for Notre Dame
None.
yet. Yeah, not a single person. Everyone's bought in. Even the, even the players who are four back, right? They're all bought in. They're doing whatever they can to help the team win. Charles Jagusah, I mean, look, the guy has a very promising future. It's a shame that he had his pec injury because he's someone we obviously could have used if he was healthy this year. Um, Apparently, Charles is. I've read that he's a pretty big film nut. Like he's a guy who really studies film. So for him to make a comment like that, just watching the Georgia film, it seems like they're a little more interested in individual accolades. He would be one of the people who's probably a bit more qualified to even make a statement like that than most, just because he analyzes film in such an in-depth manner. But yeah, great story. I think that just kind of tells you that the profile of the players on our team, the typical person who commits to Notre Dame. Like again, they have the team mindset. They're not just focused on the individual. Of course, you want to do well as an individual, but it's the team as a whole that really matters, and that's what's going to carry you through to the next level. So yeah, Brett. Yeah, great, Brett. Thanks for sharing. That's a great story. I have one question. You mentioned you
Yeah.
said Jordan Love. You met his family. Did you mean Julian Love?
Yeah. No, 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 no. Jordan Love of the Green Bay
Oh, it's
Packers.
Jordan Love. Oh,
Yeah,
really? Okay, Jordan Love, Green Bay Packers. Okay,
the
all right, all right.
Yeah, the Packers were playing the Falcons last year, and we were hanging around after the game, like trying to see if we could get autographs, swung and missed. And I saw his mom walk out, and I recognized her from TV. And I'm like, "That's Jordan Love's mom." And my friends sitting there were like, "No way!" And I'm like, "That's 100% Jordan Love's mom." And my friend went, "Do you think I should go out ask for like her autograph?" And I looked at her friend Amy, and I'm like, "Yeah." And like, so we all walked up to her. We're like, "Are you Jordan Love's mom?" And she's like, "Yeah." And her name's Anna Love. And she's
Anna
like,
Love. Okay.
no one's ever asked for my autograph. Why do you want my autograph? And our friend just looked at her and she's like, because you've raised the most amazing son ever. And Anna Love just started beaming, glowing, was like, oh my God, you've made my day. The Packers lost. Like she's in a bad mood. Like sports brings people together. And I think
Yeah.
thanking the parents for, look, if it's not for the parents, there's no kids. If there's no kids, we don't have these players that we love. And that applies to college, that
Yeah.
applies to pro sports. So no, no, no. Jordan Love, NFL.
Totally. Yeah, that's funny because I guess when you made that comment, I was like, all right, he either meant Julian Love or if he meant Jordan Love. I'm like, surely Brett didn't just see someone with a Jordan Love jersey and just went up to, but it makes when you said you recognized her, that made sense. But
It
I
was
didn't
like
realize that
in
for a
the
second.
players' locker room, and she had the pass, and she like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for a second I thought you just went up to a random person who was wearing a Jordan Love jersey. You're like, hey, are you related to Jordan Love? And they're like, no, I'm just Jordan Love's the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. A lot of people have a Jordan Love jersey.
funny. Good,
um,
good clarification. Well, speaking of
that is a
Charles
good clip.
watching film, you and I have a lot of film to go to watch of the Penn State Nittany Lions. So today, Notre Dame is Sugar Bowl champions. We are riding high. Garish Nation, until we are with you again, we've got our work to do. We will come back. We will prep this Orange Bowl preview for you. But tonight, it's all about celebrating it. Go enjoy this one. Have an extra drink with a friend. Hug someone you know and that you love dearly. And until we talk again, Girish and beat Nittany Lions.
Irish beating Nittany Lions.